and welcome to Thoughtful Tuesday Turnaround. My name is Jen, and I am your host of this livecast and podcast. Today's episode is about finding your flow and being able to become aware of and really challenge our never-ending flow of thinking that we do in our lives. This episode is a follow-up to Thrive and Shine HR's episode that we had just the other day that had to do with the never-ending flow that we have in the field of HR. And after that episode, I really sat down and really thought about how much we get stuck within ourselves in terms of really truly believing that it's never ending. And the reality being that within ourselves, we have so much more power than we give ourselves credit to when it comes to being able to break free of this belief that our workloads and our lives are never ending flows, and being able to gain more calm and more clarity in our lives as well. So what I really want to do today is I want to kind of take that concept of looking at how it can come towards us in an external world, and really want to pay attention today to how we can become more aware of and gain control of what's happening in our internal world. So that's really going to be the focus of today. And one of the things that I know I've talked about before, but I want to kind of bring some light to it, is that many times as humans, we're so not fully aware of how much we are constantly thinking. I think there was a study not too long ago that said that we're really only fully aware of about 20% of our thoughts. And the other 80% of what we're thinking about at any given time is happening on autopilot. And so that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing for many of us, because we are programmed towards a bias, towards a negativity. Many times we're not even aware of the undersurface thinking that is just peppered with opinions and perceptions and judgments and discontent and so much that's happening under the surface. And so that's really what we're going to focus on today, is lifting up our lids, recognizing how much is going on, this never-ending flow of thinking that we're doing in our lives, and then being able to gain control through our awareness and then through our active intention of being able to practice shifting the way that we think about the things that come up in our lives. So I want to give a quick example before we get going. And it was something that happened to me recently. I was at a grocery store and I was behind somebody in line who was really struggling because they had food stamps and they had coupons and they had, there were several different things going on. And here I was in a hurry to get through the store, get home, get dinner going, right? All of these things were going on in my mind. And here was this person in front of me who was taking a long time, who was clearly agitated and frustrated. The employee at the grocery store was clearly agitated and frustrated. So what ended up happening with me, without even recognizing, without even being aware of it, within about 30 seconds, I was feeling aggravated and frustrated. And I was making stories about how inconvenienced I felt and how disrespectful it was, and making judgments about all of it, right? This is all starting to kind of go on in my brain without really being fully consciously aware of it. And about a minute or so into it, I caught it, and I think that right there is one of the things that you, me, us, we should be celebrating on a daily basis. Whenever we catch ourselves going down a rabbit hole of negativity, of opinions and judgments and anything else, and we catch it and we become aware of it and we ask ourselves whether or not this is the path that we want to be going down in terms of what we're thinking about, that is a massive, massive thing to celebrate. So it was one of those moments where I was able to kind of see it, I was able to recognize it, and I was able to celebrate it and say, hey, you know what? Like, I can't control those first thoughts that come up. I think I've heard this on Jay Shetty several times. We can't control what first comes up for us. We just can't. We are human beings. We're wired a certain way. It's gonna happen. But what we can control is what we do with that first thought and how we either build upon it and start, doing a build bear from that first negative thought and see it sprout and grow, or whether or not we recognize and then consciously choose whether or not that's the path we want to continue to go down. And that shift has really been something that I feel like the more I practice it, the more I engage with it, the better it gets. But it's not perfect. Like I said, it took me a full minute or so yesterday before I finally caught myself and said, oh, wait a second. And then I started to really intentionally pick out things about this individual, about the situation, about the circumstances that I could be positive about, that I could be more optimistic about, that I could at least be neutral feeling about. And that was it's a major shift, and it does require intention, and it requires practice, and it requires us to kind of get out of our own way and recognize, yeah, my first inclination was to go down this rabbit hole, but I'm going to pull myself back. I'm not going to have judgment towards myself. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to now reframe myself, and I'm going to look at this situation as positively or as neutrally as I possibly can given the circumstances, period. And that in of itself is a game changer for me to be able to kind of work that into my life, because without it, without my intention, without my conscious effort to shift that, I tell you right now, when it's unchecked, this was me the first 48 years of my life, right? I would have continued to feel the stress, the frustration, the whatever from the situation. I get back in my car. Now I'm driving on the road, feeling the frustration. Now I'm getting home. I'm letting things out on the family, not fully aware that what triggered it was really not something that needed to be triggered in the first place, but it was something that naturally came up in me without prompting. However, I now have the conscious thought of being able to recognize it and to be able to choose differently if I so desire to do so. So what I want to do today is I want to give a list of 5 things that I think that if you are in any way struggling with never-ending thinking that a lot of times takes you down rabbit holes that you don't really enjoy being down, then these are 5 things that you can start practicing today and every day in little ways, little peppering in here and there that can make a massive difference in your life. So the number one thing for me and that I want to share with you is really around awareness. The conscious awareness, like that situation that came up for me in the grocery store, that conscious awareness that I am triggered in some way, that there is something happening that's causing me to spin in a way that's not serving myself and it's not serving anybody else around me or anybody in my life. That is a big one. That is a huge thing to have happen. And I think if you just did that alone each day when you're in the meeting, that Jerry is, getting on your nerves again, catch that. recognize it, become aware of it, and then even perhaps take it one step further and say, how can I think about Jerry or think about this situation a little bit differently that might actually be of more of service to myself and my own mindset, and also to Jerry and in this meeting in a way that may perhaps help kind of shift it in a more positive direction. So that's number one, getting awareness around what's really going on, and then recognizing that you've got the power to do something about it. And you've also got the power to choose not to do something about it. But either way, know that it's something that is happening within yourself and that it's happening without your awareness a good 80% of the time. And I just had a conversation with somebody just yesterday about that because they were talking to one of their employees, and they came into the conversation feeling a lot of frustration about what that employee has not been doing, what they committed to. They're not meeting expectations. And so here this manager was wanting to have a conversation with that employee and communicate this to that employee. That frustration that they were feeling, however, was still very much a part of how they communicated to that employee. And in their mind, from their perspective, they really felt as though they were trying to stay calm, they were trying to be clear, they were trying to communicate effectively. Yet, from that employee's experience, they felt it in the tone. They felt it in the body language. They felt it in the eye contact. Everything the employee felt was that frustration, regardless of the words that actually were coming out of the mouth of the manager. So the manager and I have a follow-up conversation, and I kind of bring that awareness to her. And I say, just kind of putting this out there, if you still were feeling the frustration, even if you're trying to be very intentional with your words when you communicate to that employee, is it possible that this employee is feeling that frustration, feeling that energy? That manager had never thought of that before, had not thought of that in that way before, or recognized those nonverbals might still be seeping out in some way. Because as they were talking to that employee, even though they were using all the right words, they recognized that in the back of their mind, they were feeling the frustration, right? There were some thoughts that were still going in their minds about, why is this still coming up? Why do I have to tell you this again, right? These are kind of the background things that were finding their way out. And so as soon as this manager became aware that that was actually happening, it felt like a weight kind of got lifted off their shoulders. And I think for all of us, that can be the case, is becoming aware that that really is part of our existence, that as much as we're going to try to put on a brave face or whatever mask you want to put on, but if under the surface what we're really feeling is X, Y, and Z, and what we're really thinking about is X, Y, and Z, like it or not, that is going to come through in how we show up. That is going to come through in how we present ourselves to others. And so having that awareness as well is something that I think can really help us recognize why this matters, because it's not just about ourselves in, kind of controlling or manipulating how we can communicate in a situation where deep down we're really feeling frustrated or angry or whatever. It's really about recognizing that our communication and how we present ourselves is way beyond the verbal. And by doing that, by kind of checking in with that and having that awareness here and there, I think we can then start to be more intentional about how we truly want to be showing up in these conversations, and then recognizing that little bit of extra work that perhaps we might be able to do, that premeditated work that we can do before going into these conversations, so that we can be aware of it. You don't have to change it. It doesn't have to go away. If frustration truly is a part of your existence when you're going to communicate with that employee, that's okay. If that's what's real for you, then that's what's real for you. However, it's also important to be aware that that is playing a part in how then that communication is coming out and also how it's being received. So, big things I think that we can start and you can start doing each and every day as situations arise to be able to start gut checking and tuning into these kinds of things. Number two, of how we can start becoming more aware of and consciously impact the never ending flow of thinking in our lives, is around meditation and mindfulness. So, in every episode of Thoughtful Tuesday Turnaround, I'm going to bring up mindfulness in some way. And today is absolutely no different. One of the things that I have really found over the course of my time being a pretty consistent meditator is that there is so much that tends to be under the surface in our lives. There's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on outside of us, and there's a lot going on inside. And so meditation, mindfulness, whatever tools that you can use to slow down, to become more aware of what is really going on within yourself, I think the more then we can become more conscious and intentional around how we really want to be showing up. And so this is not that much different of my first one of becoming more aware of that negative thinking. And this one, when it comes to mindfulness and meditation, it's really about just becoming aware of what is, right? Becoming aware of what exists within yourself. So then that way it's not about resistance. It's not about, pushing back the reality of what's in your existence. It's really about accepting it. It's about becoming at peace with your reality and then being able to kind of consciously create from that place. And that is something that I think takes time and it takes practice. But when we can really become at peace and accept what is within our own existence, I think that for myself and so many others kind of starts to lay what I picture as like a foundation, right? When we can become really at peace with exactly what is, that is a place that then allows us to get some stability within ourselves. Good, bad, ugly, and different, it doesn't matter. I think just that awareness alone is enough to give us stability from a place that then we can move forward, having some clarity, having some awareness of what it is that we're really wanting to see as an outcome of whatever the circumstances are in our lives. But when we first can kind of become truthful and honest with ourselves around what is, I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling stress, I'm feeling, those types of things that come up for us, those are our reality. And whether or not it's it's something that is, real or perceived danger, that's a whole nother conversation around our thoughts and our perceived dangers or stresses and whether or not they're real or not so real, right? But really beyond that is then being able to kind of take some intention from that and say, okay, this is the reality of where I'm at. I'm feeling really uncomfortable. I'm feeling a little fearful about having to go into this conversation. What would happen if I just owned that? What if I just owned that discomfort? That it's not a problem. It's not a bad thing that I'm feeling some fear, I'm feeling some discomfort about the situation. And just becoming at peace with that reality. That, I think, is what I mean by creating a stability or a foundation within yourself. Because as soon as we stop resisting the reality of what is, the sooner we're going to be able to create from a place of intention. So mindfulness and meditation can really, really help with that. It helps us to just slow asses down, just slow ourselves down enough to be able to recognize what is. And then from a place of non-judgment, from a place of non, self ourselves up, to be able to then say, okay, here I am, here's what is. And now what do I want to do about it? Where do I want to go from here, being that this is my reality? And then the other thing, kind of going back to the first bullet, is challenging and questioning if some of that reality that comes up for you through the process of meditation is negative and kind of creates this perpetual thought pattern. Challenging those things within the process of meditation can be an incredibly powerful thing, right? Is this necessary? Is this serving me? Is this serving others? Right? How is this helping the situation to be thinking about this in this way? These are the kinds of questions that I really regularly and actively engage with through the process of meditation. It's not about just sitting there quietly all the time, especially when I really find myself worked up about something. I start to become curious as hell, because the more curious you can become about your own state of mind, the more you can start kind of picking through what truly is necessary, what truly is needed, versus what might be coming up for you because of our natural tendencies to start going down rabbit holes and start to worry incessantly and doubts and things that may not actually be serving us in the way that we would need them to be. So this is like one of those things that I think is an after effect of the process of meditation, but really one of those powerful things that, especially when it comes to wanting to become more aware and more intentional around your habit of overthinking, this is a really, really powerful place to start. All right, number 3 is journaling. So journaling can come in different forms. I think writing journals are really, really good, a good way to kind of get our thoughts out of our head. And sometimes what I've noticed, I've got a few friends that do this. I've tried to do it a few times and not been super successful with it. Something I still want to work on though, because there is some really good thought behind the idea of, before you go into a meditation practice, do a thought download first. Spend 5 minutes journaling what's happening right now in your mind, right? What actually is coming up for you as you're thinking about your day, as you're thinking about what's on your mind. What is coming up? Because that then will give you that framework that when you go into the meditation, you can start becoming more curious about. You can start asking those questions based on what actually has arisen for you. So that's a practice that I really want to become more intentional about doing. I'm super good about the meditation, but I'll be honest, the journaling is somewhat inconsistent for me. But I think in talking with the friends that I've talked with, when it really comes down to becoming more aware of the spin cycle in our minds, journaling is going to be a powerful and effective way to get to the bottom of what's really going on. All right, number four, engaging in physical activity. Get out there, stay inside, do what you need to do, but do something active each day. Our bodies need to move. Our bodies truly need to move. And one of the things that I have realized for myself is, even if I'm not interested in doing a full workout, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, stretch. Stretching has been one of the things that it's easy, it doesn't take a huge amount of effort, and it really actually helps open up the body way more than I ever realized. There was a study in Fitness Magazine, I think last year, that really talked about, if you did nothing else each day other than like 15 or 20 minutes of just moving your body and stretching it and opening it up, it has a huge and profound impact long term over our mindset and our well being. And why is that? I think because our bodies are actually, they are our temples, right? And our temples, when we are feeling a lot of stress, when we're feeling a lot of overwhelm, when we're caught up in the spin cycle of negativity, our bodies will start to constrict, almost like a puffer fish, right? It starts to just suck into itself. And so being intentional about making sure that we open up our bodies, that we move them, that we get that physical activity in one way or another is how we actually can get out some of the things that are stuck within us. And I know that sounds like really interesting for some people out there who see their minds and their bodies as like this separate thing. But the reality of it is that they're not at all. Our minds and our bodies are very much connected. And so the more that we're taking care of our body, the more we're taking care of our mind. The more that we're taking care of our mind, the more that we really can and should be taking care of our body. All right, last one is set boundaries around our thinking time. This one I think is the hardest one for me, and I think it's going to be the hardest one for everyone out there. Setting boundaries around thinking is not something that we were raised with or really given a general idea of what that really means. And what I'm referring to when I say set boundaries around your thinking time is really be intentional that when you are focused and that when you desire to focus on an activity that's in front of you, give it your full and undivided attention as much as you possibly can. And do that with as much of your activities of your day to day, whether it's washing dishes, taking a shower, eating breakfast, driving your car. Give your attention as much as you possibly can to those activities while you're in them. And then give your attention to your thinking, to what's going on in your mind, that positive, that negative, that neutral, and be intentional about when you do that as well. Trying to separate those out from our constant, incessant thinking to being able to say, you know what, I'm going to push pause on that. I'm going to focus my full attention on this right now. And then every time I catch myself going off track, which is going to happen, especially at the beginning for those of us who are not super practiced in this, it's going to be something you're going to have to pull yourself back in over and over and over again. But I promise you, this is one of those practices that you're going to come back to me later on and say, OMG, I had no idea how huge this was going to be for my mindset and how huge this could be for my mental health. Because now I can kind of start to become aware of when they're sneaking in. When those pesky, never-ending thoughts start to sneak in, over time, you start to actually see it happening. Whereas, again, throughout the first 48 years of my life, no clue, no freaking clue, because it was just constant, just constant all day, every day. And so pulling myself back and starting to kind of catch it as much as I can and being able to say, this is time where I am just going to focus on what I am doing right here in this moment. And just repeating that, putting that on repeat over and over again. And again, I promise you, there is something amazingly powerful through that practice. All right, those are my 5 recommendations for how to be able to break free from the never-ending thinking that holds us back, keeps us in suffering, and keeps us from really living a lives where we can thrive and shine in our lives. So with that, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't already, please download, rate, review this podcast or live cast. Let me know what you think. What are you hearing that you enjoy? What would you love to hear more of? How can I best serve this community? So thank you so much again for joining, and have an incredible day. Bye now.